Thank you, Amal. Yeah, like that was a very cool introduction. Yeah, essentially, like what's interesting about being an architect, I think, is that that architecture is essentially the art and science of sort of continually refurbishing the surface of our planet so it actually fits to the way we want to live. But strangely, the public debate about architecture is quite often limited to sort of contemplating the final result, like sort of looking at the architectural object and sort of, is it beautiful, is it ugly, does it fit in, does it look alien? Typically sort of coming up with names for for buildings, like sort of, is Norman Foster's new tower in London, is it a sausage or a gherkin or a dildo? So recently we asked ourselves if you could actually sort of go behind the scenes, and instead of just looking at the architectural object, really sort of look at the processes and the sort of the different forces of society that actually shape the buildings into what they are. So we tried to ask ourselves if we could find a way of, like, a media to tell stories with architecture, and we found out that we didn't have to invent it. It already existed in the form of a comic book. That essentially comic books are sort of ways of using images, evolution of some of the ideas of our sort of architectural heroes. Firstly, obviously, Mies van der Rohe saying less is more, triggering the sort of the modern sort of the modernistic revolution, sort of liberating architecture from the constraints of style and history. But quickly less, and that triggered the postmodern counter-revolution. Robert Venturi saying less is a bore, like why do modern buildings have to be so boring? Then my old boss, Rem Koolhaas, thinking more and more is more. Sort of not really a manifesto, but more this idea of sort of suspending judgment and sort of more like observing objectively the sort of what happens in the city, in this case the impact of global capitalization on urban space, sort of replacing the classic virtues such as like composition or hierarchy with. Then came Obama, sort of yes we can, introducing sort of, let's say, optimism in a time of global financial crisis, but maybe more sort of interesting, he was running in opposition to a very unpopular former president, or like the Republican Party, kind of sort of kind of inspiring sort of hybrid or sort of symbiotic position. And finally, what we're trying to say with Yes is More is essentially this sort of departure from the traditional image of the avant-garde as being this sort of a, you know, angry young men rebelling against the establishment.
Jadi kata kaya radikalitas lho rek. Kudu nentokno sopo atau opo sing lagi dilawan. Kaya iku revolusi ngedepi sesuatu ngono lho. Duduk revolusi tapi evolusi, oke?
I actually think that Darwin is one of the best people to sort of explain the design process in our office. His famous diagram. There might be like a really good idea, but it doesn't really fit in with this particular context or program. But like for another client in another culture, in another context, it could actually be the right answer to a completely different question. Yeah, lastly, sort of this sort of a notion of dealing with like historical context and this sort of UNESCO doc. So we thought it was kind of a slightly boring competition to make like a museum in a basement. But when we went and looked at the dock, it's sort of 150 meters long and 30 meters wide. We thought like, actually the museum program was twice the size of the dock itself. So it would be this sort of 2-story claustrophobic dark basement. So we thought like rather than drowning the dock with museum program, if we could keep it completely empty, it would be this sort of like really monumental public space sunken 8 meters below the level of the sea. And we started reading the technical reports. And essentially the dock right now it's full of water. So when you empty it, the pressure of the surrounding earth, with ESCO, they said that our building had to be completely invisible, not sort of bothering the view of the castle. But the director and all the sponsors of the museum, they wanted some kind of a masterpiece that could sort of attract people to visit the museum. So by turning it into a void, we could combine the demand for invisibility with the desire for visibility. So when we submitted the competition, we were quite certain there was like no way in hell we could ever win this project. It was like there was one condition in the brief, and that was that you had to build inside the dock, and we essentially built outside. But the jury liked it, and we won the competition. But then something strange happened, like of ideas that I'd like to sort of explain. Essentially starts with my own house. And essentially they sort of transformed the south facade into this sort of vertical social space. Like on a nice summer day, you'll actually get to meet all the ladies in a 10-meter radius around your balcony. It's completely flat. If you want to have like a nice south-facing slope with a view, you have to do it yourself. So we sort of push the corner down in one side, making it this sort of south-facing slope. Then we sort of cut up the block so we don't steal the view from my apartment. And essentially the parking is occupying all the
berkembang peradabannya hingga di mana-mana manusia